So if you're in the loop of animation, odds are you have been seeing people tear the new Clone High revival a new one. While a lot of the backlash has been people exaggerating their opinions for internet points as usual, judging the whole thing off of one episode or an out-of-context clip, some of it has been genuinely valid criticisms. Like how Abe is kind of a bigger asshole than usual in the season 2 premiere because they chose to have him be the one who has to learn what is and isn't socially acceptable in 2023.
Oh, nice. That stuff was so retarded.
Retired. Yes, the phrase was retired.
No, I was gonna say retarded.
Shut up!
A story that probably would have went to Gandhi if he wasn't, you know. I don't want to dwell on this bit for too long, but I do just want to put out there that although this is season 2 to us, this is a brand new show in the eyes of Max. And this first episode is another pilot, meant to introduce the show to new audiences. And if you haven't noticed, a lot of pilots are rough around the edges, partially because they try to pander to casual audiences as a means to hook them in. For example, Harley Quinn is one of my favorite adult animated series running right now, but I think the first episode is easily the worst because it really shoves excessive violence and crude humor in your face, so you know it's for adults. The characters feel like they take a backseat to those elements in comparison to the rest of the series, which is why it isn't nearly as enjoyable for me. It doesn't help that other shows have gotten out their episodes on cancel culture already, which is also a talking point for plenty of skits on the internet, so a lot of people are sick of it being talked about in such an in-your-face way. But don't get me wrong, with reboots and revivals having a messy track record across the board, I get why people are becoming more cynical and jaded towards new iterations of a show or movie they really love. But what I'm saying is that sometimes pilots can fumble at their job because the show has to find its footing. And in Clone High's case, if you keep watching to just the second episode, you'll see an immediate jump in quality. It's not perfect. Writing aside, the new animation style takes some getting used to. The characters have just a smidge too much movement compared to the original, but I'm still tuning in and I'm still enjoying it. But enough of the ass kissing. Kind of. Because what has been the most controversial aspect of the revival by far has been the designs for the new clones. Mainly Harriet Tubman, Confucius, and Frida Kahlo. Because they're new additions to the main cast, and 2 of them had pre-existing designs in the original series that weren't used in the reboot. And it's not just people trashing on the new designs without giving any constructive criticism. I've seen plenty of talented artists on Twitter and TikTok redesign the characters with their own unique spin. And I like those spins. They're very fun to look at. Side note, I do think there's a difference between people redesigning the clones for fun and people redesigning them to make something they feel is a superior design. And it all comes down to intent. And one of those intentions being way more disrespectful to the show's crew than the other. And I don't think I need to spell out which is which. But I can't say that this discourse as a whole really feels warranted, because I don't think these designs are that bad, especially once you gain context from, you know, watching the show. When previews for the revival were first trickling out onto the internet, so many people were screenshotting the new clones going, haha, you can tell which ones aren't from the original series. Well, that was the point, bozo! At the start of season 2, the clones who were frozen in 2003 noticed there's a lot of students they don't recognize, because they're now going to school of clones from Gen Z. Clones that were made in 2007, and thus their designs try to adhere to modern fashion trends. Hence the dyed hair and various accessories. Now, this isn't to hand wave any and all criticism, and that I'm saying the intent means that the designs are actually really good. I just think that without context, you can easily look at this and think someone dropped their OCs into the Clone High revival and find it all the more jarring. And in the case of the new Frida and Harriet, it's fine to prefer their old looks, but I'd argue this show implies that these are different clones and thus different characters. They didn't bother editing OG Harriet out of the archival footage when everyone got frozen at the dance. And we know those clones got unthawed, so they didn't get retconned out, they still exist. And I'd love it if they actually did an episode about that later on. Have the 2 Harriets and the 2 Fridas interact, giving the Gen Z clones imposter syndrome, leading to an interesting exploration about that. Scutsworth said that he used a different set of historical figures when he kept running Clone High in secret, but like, I feel he could have reused 1 or 2 historical figures, because he clearly did. And to me, it makes sense not every clone looks exactly the same. I like when media makes clones look different from one another, because that's just a fact of life. Not all cloned animals look identical, so why would humans? But again, this doesn't hand-wave any criticism about these particular designs. So with all this in mind, I want to take a look at the design for each of these 3 new mains and go over what works and doesn't work about them, in my humble opinion. Starting with Confucius, because he doesn't have an old clone to be compared to. I mean, the wiki alleged that he did, but bro does not look like a teenager, so I'm glad they got a new one. Now, I really like the idea of how this Confucius looks. He has a modern cut with the top of his hair dyed, and his hoodie and baggy pink top feels like it's supposed to be an allusion to the robes the real-life Confucius wore. And I feel like this design really fits his hyperactive personality. Where this design loses me a bit, however, is definitely the colors of his pink top and the green belt bag. Now, I'm no color stylist or fashionista, but the problem for me is that the bag seems to complement the green stripes on the shoes, yet we're usually looking at the characters from the waist up. So the color of the bag sticks out more than it probably should. The colors just feel uneven. This is where I feel like a redesign by an artist named Chazzy appealed to me a lot more, by making Confucius's top a solid green while moving the pink pattern to his belt bag. It's a simple fix that goes a long way. Something I noticed about the new clones is that Confucius, Frida, and Harriet all share blue, green, pink, and yellow in their color palettes. The yellow in this case being the stars on Confucius's phone case. So I assume this is meant to be the color scheme of the Gen Z clones, and I really want to keep that in mind, because I tried messing around with some colors out of curiosity, and I just ended up appealing to my own sensibilities rather than making something that would genuinely work in the context of the show. Next up is Frida, who I think is an objective improvement over their Season 1 counterpart. I love that instead of a thin unibrow, it's a very thick one that allows the artist to have fun with her expressions in a way that they can't with other characters. Her hair is now broken up into 2 buns with flowers in each one. She's a lot more stylish, and in general, she looks way more like a teenage clone than the original. Let's be real, the OG Frida was made to be a background character and thus had way less thought put into her design. She's literally just Frida Kahlo in some 2000s teen clothes. The most unique thing about this one is her hair, and I think Gen Z Frida has her beat in that regard too. Yeah, I don't have any criticisms. I actually really love her design. A fun look for a fun character. And all of that brings us to the most divisive of all the designs, Harriet. A lot of people are a fan of her Season 1 counterpart's look, and I can't fault them for it. Although it's pretty much the same situation as OG Frida, where not as much thought went into her design as the other clones. What they landed on really worked. This is a charming design all on its own. It's a shame she basically says nothing outside of a deleted scene.
These standardized tests are culturally biased. What would an upper-class male Caucasian most likely do on a weekend at the Cape?
Psst. Tubman, the answer's D. Croquet.
So a lot of the criticisms towards the new design comes down to her hairstyle and color palette. As just like Confucius, a lot of people think the colors are a little too bright. And an artist on the show shared some concepts of Harriet that people generally favored over the new design because they prefer the alternate hairstyles and outfits. And Gen Z Harriet, I like you, I really do. But I do think I agree with some of the criticisms on this one. While I don't think her hairstyle is bad or anything, I do think I would have preferred her rocking dreads or a different afro style. I like the idea of the final look, with a tall fro that kinda reminds me of JFK's ginormous hair, but I think the smaller puff above her eyes is a little distracting and I really can't put my finger on why. It's not even far off from one of her concepts. But unlike people who have grievances with these designs, I don't think it's bad. In fact, it's already grown on me. But I do think we've been seeing way more dreadheads in Gen Z, me included, so I really think that's just where my preference for another hairstyle stems from. As for her clothes, I do wish her top was something a bit closer to A or G from her concepts, but I don't hate them. Again, you get used to them quickly when watching the show. I also think that the way her eyes are drawn makes her look like a character straight out of Total Drama Island, and I know, Total Drama intentionally ripped off Clone High's art style, but there's enough differences for the two to stick out. As for her colors, I don't think the issue has anything to do with the colors themselves, but like Confucius, they could be distributed a bit better. Why not have her top be green with yellow accents instead of vice versa? I don't know. The amount of yellow in her outfit isn't doing it for me, but I'm already someone who doesn't wear yellow a bunch, so that's probably why I feel that way. Ultimately, I really don't think any of these designs are bad. Could they use a wardrobe change? Maybe, but that could always happen down the road. For now, I think people are being way too harsh on these designs because Clone High is a very beloved property, and with no context, these designs are going to be jarring to a lot of people who are already terrified of the revival being mid or worse. That being said, be sure to actually watch it past the first episode, form your own opinions, and see if you get used to the designs, and above all else, have fun with it! But that's all for this video. As always, if you enjoyed it, throw it a like, subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss a video, and follow us on social media at AwestruckVox and at Roundtable Vids. See ya!